Hello, everyone. Very excited to be here presenting and talking today about Mississippi's pretrial system and talking about the harms and learning more about money bail. My name is Katie Poore. I'm very excited to be moderating this panel. I am a supervising attorney at the Bail Project, which is a nationwide charitable bail fund that works to post bail for individuals and connect them to supportive services. And we partner here in Mississippi with the Mississippi Bail Fund Collective. And so I'm very excited to introduce our panel here. I will start first with Rukia Lumumba, who is the executive director of the People's Advocacy Institute, the co-director of the Electoral Justice Unit of the Movement for Black Lives, and a founding member of the Mississippi Bail Fund Collective. Hi, Rukia. Good to see you.
Hey, Katie. Good to be with you.
And also joining us is Thomas Bellinder, who is the legal support director for the People's Advocacy Institute, a founder of the Bellinder Law Firm, and also a founding member of the Mississippi Bail Fund Collective. Hi, Thomas. How are you doing?
Hey, Katie. Doing good. Honored to be here.
Wonderful. Well, so it's so exciting to be talking to both of you. And I know that we really want to speak to folks and talk a little bit about the pretrial system and money bail here in Mississippi. But I think it might make sense to really start with sort of what we're talking about, right? So I'll start with Thomas. If you could tell us, when we talk about money bail, what is money bail? And how do judges decide how to set bail?
So long and short of it is the system works in a way to, as it's proposed, to secure people's attendance at hearings. However, statistics show that it disproportionately affects poor people and people of color in ways in our society that desperately needs improvement.
So it sounds like, Thomas, that what you're saying is that folks who get charged with a crime, they go in front of a judge, and at least in some portion of the time or a lot of times, the judge will set some requirement to pay an amount of money to get out of jail. And folks will pay some money, even go to perhaps a bondsman, and if they have the money, they can get out of jail. Is that basically how it works?
Well, yes, because a lot of times courts will bring into the calculation, is somebody a risk? Is somebody a flight risk? Are they a risk to members of the public, to say those individuals may commit another crime or be violent or harmful, but with one caveat. If you have money, so you've got two people charged with the same crime, if both of them have been deemed to be violent and both are deemed to be potential dangers, and they both have sufficiently serious crimes, the caveat is if they have enough money, well, then we're going to let them go. We're going to turn them loose, which is contrary to the principle that the necessary aspect of this is to, make certain that the streets are safer, or that this person is not a danger or a harm. Well, if they are a danger or a harm, then an amount of money shouldn't calculate into the conversation. We should just say, look, if you're a danger or you are likely to harm someone if we let you go, well, then that's the end of it. But instead, in our capitalistic society, we say, well, you're dangerous, but if you can come up with this amount of money and pay this fee and give that to us, then we'll turn around and let you go. And so that becomes some of the contradictory nature of this aspect of our criminal justice system that says, okay, you can be dangerous, you can be violent, you can be have a risk of fleeing the country, but if you've got some money, we're willing to accept that risk and allow you to leave. So,
yeah.
And again, we're dealing pre-trial. We're dealing with people who have been alleged to commit crimes, but have not been convicted of those yet.
Okay, so and I hear what you're saying, and I wonder, Rukia, if you can jump in here to talk a little bit about what Thomas is bringing up, which is some of the problems with the money bail system, the problems with how it impacts disproportionately certain groups of people, and, you know, the connection between the amount of money you have and being able to sort of pay for your freedom. So I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about what problems there are with this system.
Thanks, Katie, and thanks, Thomas, for giving that overview of bail and how harmful it is. To add to that conversation, or to this conversation, I think that it's important to note that the South has the highest rate of incarceration due to bail, due to pretrial detention. And according to the Vera Institute of Justice, you know, the South has the highest rates of pretrial incarceration in the country. And 7 of the 10 states with the highest incarceration rates in the United States are right here in the South. And Mississippi is one of them. More than half of the people in Mississippi jails have not been convicted of a crime and are awaiting trial. When we talk about the impact of pretrial detention on families, we can't help but to talk about the mothers that are stripped away from their children for short and long periods of time. And I think it's important to note that any amount of time away from your child is a very difficult time for the child, especially. And what we've seen in Mississippi, for example, is that there has been an increase in the rate of women across the state since the early 1980s, late 1970s. We've seen 1,000% increase in the number of women incarcerated. And many of these women are incarcerated for long periods of time during pretrial detention. When we talk about just, you know, the cost, the actual financial cost of bail, Mississippi counties pay about $100 million a year to jail those who haven't been convicted of crimes. I want to say that one more time. That's $100 million a year to jail those who haven't been convicted of any crimes. And this is significant, right? In a state that is viewed and statistically, based on our data, based on income reporting, we are one of the poorest, if not the second poorest state in the nation. We go back and forth, I think, with Alabama, who's the poorest. But we also are a place that is in dire need of economic support and stability. And so to find that our dollars are going to jail people pre-trial who have not been found guilty of anything really is something that we need to be thinking about as taxpayers. You know, when we talk about race and the jailing, the pretrial detention of folks, the bail industry, we know that people of color, indigenous people, and Black people, Black Americans in jail in the US are nearly half of all Southern jails. We make up nearly half of all people in Southern jails. And more than half of the people in Mississippi jails haven't been convicted of any crime. And so I think, you know, those are some of just the basic statistics. But one thing that I like to remind people of, that even one day in jail can significantly impact the outcome of a person's economic stability. That means their ability to maintain a job. It absolutely increases their mental health, harmful mental health outcomes due to the impact of the trauma of experiencing that. And it is absolutely a separation from family. And we don't talk about that separation from family enough, but it is a critical part of this whole process.
Thank you so much for that, Rukia. And I'm wondering, just to follow up there, you know, you talked about the harms that individuals suffer when they are sort of facing the trauma of pretrial incarceration. And you touched a little bit on families. I'm wondering if you can talk just briefly about how this system of jailing folks pretrial hurts communities and hurts communities in Mississippi. So I wonder if you could maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, when we talk about how it hurts communities, I want to first go back to the cost. That's $100 million that can be going into mental health services. That's $100 million that can be going into creating feeding programs healthy ways of living programs in terms of what we put into our bodies. Many of our communities are living without fresh fruits and vegetables and no grocery store in walking distance. When we talk about $100 million, that's housing. That's housing support. And many of these things, when we talk about housing, when we talk about food, when we talk about jobs and economic stability, when we talk about mental health, we're talking about preventative mechanisms to prevent people from even having to be in contact with the carceral system, to never even have to need bail, because we're addressing the root causes of why people even interact with the carceral system, with the law enforcement system. And so I want to start there with the cost, because as taxpayers, people who live and work and grow in a place, we have the ability and should have the ability to determine how our dollars are spent. And so I think that's the first place. But then also when we talk about, families and how that impacts, I'll tell you a story of one of our first mothers, one of our first Black mothers who we were able to bail out through the National Bailout Project support. One of the mothers, she literally had been, she was getting her graduate degree at Jackson State University. She had 2 children, a 10-year-old and another child whose age I can't remember right now. She was working full time as well, taking care of her family, supporting her family and herself, and moving on towards her academic progression. And one night, her son, being a little boy who is inquisitive and loves to do things and test out things, he decided that he was going to play with the fire extinguisher. And so he was playing with the fire extinguisher. It burst, it caused, the fluid from the fire extinguisher to go everywhere, damaged some of the property of the apartment that they were living in. And it caused a lot of commotion. So the neighbors called the police because they weren't sure what was happening. The police come to her apartment and they look her name up in the system, and they find that she had a 5-year-old warrant for her arrest. She had no idea about this warrant, had no idea what the possible charges could even be, and had never received any notice from the court that she even had a warrant or any charges brought against her. They immediately arrested her. They literally took the children because the children couldn't stay there by themselves. So the police had to take the children and someone else had to come and figure out where the children were going to stay. She was detained over the weekend. And it was through God's grace that her mother had literally heard about our program. We had just started. And so her mother literally reached out to us and we were able to immediately begin the process of bailing her out. As a result of that short-term stay over the weekend inside of detention, inside of the jail, she lost her job. Because she had to go to work the next day and she missed it. She got behind in her studies because the mental anguish of the experience really caused her to miss days of school. And so she lost her apartment. She was evicted from her apartment. So the collateral consequences of even a day in jail, even a day of pretrial detention, are really great. And the consequence not only to her, but to her children who now were homeless, and they all had to be going from house to house living with relatives until they were able to find some stability again. So that's just an example of how bail really impacts families.
Well, thank you so much for that, Rukia, and for sharing that story. And one of the things that you brought up that I think it would be great to talk to folks about, and I'll turn this to you, Thomas, to talk a little bit about. Just tell us about the Mississippi Bail Fund Collective and what support the Bail Fund offers to folks.
So the Mississippi Bail Fund Collective is a collective in a true sense of lawyers and advocates and social workers and mental health professionals and business people and just people from all walks of life who've come together and created a bail fund for individuals in Mississippi. We have partnered with several organizations, one of them being the Bail Project, in an effort to provide not just bail funds. Being a bail fund is it's a critically important part of the work, but it's not as simple as posting or having money to post to serve as this surety or stand in the gap for people in between when they're arrested and when they, are scheduled to come back to court. The Mississippi Bail Fund Collective works to connect people to services that they so desperately need. It's a combination of a court watch type system where there is an element of people returning to court when they are scheduled. And so some of that is necessary, but it's also a social support type of mechanism where we want to find people because your concerns are what the basic things that we've talked about: housing, employment, food, and just having 3 square meals a day and having a roof over somebody's head. Well, people who in some of these circumstances, those services are still so desperately needed. And so it connects. We have a network of individuals that we work with, and other agencies and organizations that provide certain types of specialized services that we try to connect these people to, because it's a broader goal of ending money bail, but it's also a more specific work of what do these individuals need, and it starts with their pretrial release and flows into all these other different aspects of life. And so I think the bail, the Mississippi Bail Fund Collective, we are unique in that way, simply that there's a lot of things that go into this process that go beyond just a bail fund. It's really an organization put together by individuals who want to make a change and who realize, and we're also not unrealistic about the things that we undertake. You got to understand that there's so many different things that go into each individual situation, and so to neglect any one of those does a disservice for that individual in all of what we're trying to accomplish. So if we don't consider the fact that we can post bail for somebody, but they might need help with employment, they might need connection to somewhere to stay, they might need something that goes beyond just, okay, we got them out of jail, and now what happens next? How do we confirm? Do they have a ride to even get back to court? Do they have somebody in their life to help them, guide them? What led to this situation? And so a lot of that is baked into our to what we do as a collective.
And Katie, if you don't mind,
yeah. Absolutely.
I wanted to highlight the fact that the legal support component of it too is really important, and Thomas does a lot of that lead work with us, with our clients that we're able to bail out. The case that I talked about earlier, the mother I talked about earlier, she spent that short time in detention, and her case was literally just completely dismissed through the help of Thomas. Minor charge. Well, the charges weren't as minor, but the circumstances were super minor. And he was able to get that removed. And so I think what Thomas is talking about when we talk about the support aspect is critical. I think that oftentimes when we think of systems, the criminal system, we think of punitive measures, we think of punishment, and we don't think of all of the ways that we're able to actually create a better outcome for everyone involved. And so through the support, through needs assessments, which we do for every client that we are considering bailing out, every candidate, we do a needs assessment to see if we're able to support their short-term needs in terms of getting out, getting housed, getting support. And so I think, that's just a critical component. And then, the other thing I just wanted to mention is that we're not naive, as Thomas said. There are a lot of reasons that people find themselves engaged with the carceral system. We recognize that, bail is a complicated thing, that public safety is a complicated thing. But we do believe that when you provide the support, both the mental health support, we have social workers on board, housing support that allows people to be more stable, then we decrease the likelihood that people will engage in harm when they are in the community.
I'm glad you brought that up, Rukia, because one of the things I was going to ask, to both of you was, I think one of the things that we hear a lot is that, well, we need money bail to keep folks safe. We need to have a system where people need to pay something to get out of jail because that's how we fight crime. That's how we address, rising violence in certain places. So I know you started talking about that, Rukia. I'm wondering what you would say in response to that. And then Thomas, I'd love to hear any thoughts you have.
Well, I'll keep it simple and short and let Thomas take us away. But if wealth could determine a person's ability to commit harm, then we wouldn't see as much harm as we see in this world today, right? The fact that we literally just assume that somebody who is poorer, who doesn't have as much money, is going to somehow be more of a danger to someone else who committed a similar crime, but had the money, had the wealth to bail themselves out. To me, it's illogical, right? And so, and not only to me is it illogical, the data shows that it's illogical. It doesn't make sense. Just because you're richer doesn't mean you're going to be safer. And just because you're poorer doesn't mean that you're going to be more harmful. So.
Yeah, you really, you hit the nail on the head, because it's kind of this, circular logic of, okay, am I violent? Am I a risk to society? Okay, if you're saying yes, well, then I'm a risk, right? Then I am dangerous. Then that means that there should not be any condition of my release that would safely protect the society, right? So what you're saying is that freedom can still be bought. So that means if my level of violence also meets with my level of resource and income, then this other part doesn't really matter. So if all that matters is how much money's in my bank account, well, then just say that. Don't put it under this fake header of you're dangerous, or I don't know if you're going to come back to court, or when all the statistics show that the majority of people come back to court whether you set them a bail or not, because most people live within a distance of where they would be arrested from. They're close to it, and the vast majority of people, again, this is something that kind of drives me crazy sometimes too, is the people who would be most likely to say flee to another country would need what to do so? Money. They would need a big bank account full of cash to create a new identity and get someplace wherever in another country. So if somebody is truly going to flee beyond, okay, if I'm leaving, I've lived in Mississippi my whole life and I got a charge here, well, okay, if I'm going to flee, everybody I know is here, and especially if I'm if my income is limited, well, now I don't have the ability and the resources to uproot and then go create a new life with a new identity in some other place. The people who would be most likely to do that are the same ones who could make $1 million bond, post 10% of that with their cash assets and their ability to do so. And so, again, you get back to, well, if what you're saying is true, that you want to prevent people from, you want to make sure people come back to trial when they're set. You want to make sure that violent offenders, and again, you're calling somebody an offender or somebody who is charged, say, with a violent crime, are not going to go and harm someone. Well, it doesn't make any sense to attach a monetary value to that, because does my having the money make me any less violent? Does it make me any less likely to show up to court? Well, no. Statistics and even just kind of some common sense and human nature says look, if I'm going to run, it's more likely I'm going to actually run and get away if I have some money to do so, rather than, yeah, I might run, but if I don't have two nickels to rub together, I'm not going to make it very far, because I'm going to be right back on everybody's radar, you know, 2 houses down, which is all the farther I can make it, because I don't have all these funds to actually do so.
Well, thank you for that, Thomas. And I want to, as we're sort of wrapping up, I have, and maybe this is a big question, but I want to hear from both of you, because I think it's important to think about, which is, Thomas, you touched on what a world would look like without money bail. And I would love to hear really from both of you about what should we be working to? What should Mississippi be working towards, if we should be acknowledging that this system has some flaws? It's costing the Mississippi taxpayer a huge amount of money. So where should we be going next? And maybe I'll start with Rukia about where should we be going next?
One thing I just want to highlight that Thomas said is that the majority of people who are released on bail, they literally come back to court. 90% of people who are released come back to court. 90%. So what are we doing, y'all? And so I think that the data speaks for itself. We need to think about it. But when we're thinking about solutions, where do we go next? I think that the model that we have for the bail project, the Mississippi Bail Fund Collective, I think those national models that we see, national bailout, and our local model, as I said, the Mississippi Bail Fund Collective, is we provide the social support to get people back to court, making sure that people have the support that they need for housing, for transportation, for mental health support, for some type of economic stability, and just, some basic things of just making sure people get the communication to return to court. I think that we would create a fairer system, a more just system that allows for people to actually engage in their own defense without this burden of being limited to access to their attorney because they're behind a cage, to being limited to their access to family and friends that can help them navigate and think about what they're being charged with, and even just to be of sound mind, to be able to make an informed decision. It's much harder to be behind a cage to make a decision that is in your best interest than it is to be out in the community with your loved ones. And then, the last thing I'll say about it is that I think that it is really critical for us to stop depending on what we have known as the only solution to what we can dream about as people who have experienced the consequences of this jail, pretrial, and carceral system. When we see that the majority of people that are behind bars are Black, are brown, are indigenous, are people of color, are poor, we have to ask ourselves, are we creating a system of justice or one of further oppression? And so I think it's really critical for us to begin to just think a little bigger, think a little deeper. Don't be scared of holding someone accountable instead of just punishment. Don't be scared of actually looking at what people need in order to prevent further harm than actually just engaging in what a lot of people call tough love. So that's where I'll be quiet. Thanks, Kate.
It's hard to follow that. No, I just echo everything that was said. It takes a step. It takes a step to head in the right direction towards a system that is not punitive on the front end. the criminal justice system is there's an element of punishment to it. Always will, always has been, always will be. We think about if someone harmed our loved ones, would we want that person punished? Absolutely. I'm a defense attorney by trade, but I'm a human being first and foremost, and so totally. I'm with that. It's just, there's a concept in American jurisprudence that's called due process, and so some of these aspects of our system truly do deprive people of an element of due process. Particularly in the private practice realm, and where we see the overlap between when someone's represented by a public defender, when someone's represented by private counsel, and the way that families are required to make this determination between, okay, we have X amount of resources. Do we bail him out, him or her, or do we get our own attorney? Well, why is that? Why does that have to be such a serious concern? And why do we have to make that? Does it have to be one or the other most of the time? Because it truly is. And honestly, a lot of times people are required to sit in pretrial detention because their family can only they only have enough funds to do one or the other. If they just so happen to be blessed enough to have a certain amount of money, typically you have to hire the attorney, because then that's what's leading to the defense of the underlying charge versus the temporary pretrial release that only leads to the court date where, okay, if I've got my court date 6 months, 8 months, or however long down the road, charge doesn't go away. The only thing that could potentially make the charge go away is a decent and thorough investigation throughout, which is what you hire and pay the lawyer to do. Well, if I've got to pay my lawyer and I've got to pay for my freedom, I got to pay for the release, I got to pay ahead of time to even have full access or go back to my job to start making money to afford all this stuff. Well, our American system puts that strain on due process by this cash bail system, and so prayerfully, the future looks like eliminating that to the fullest extent that we can, so where the resources are shifted to certainly, because again, the punishment aspect will always be there, and that's what's great about our American system. Our system of jury trials provides everyone the right, the state of Mississippi included, to be able to put on its evidence and request that someone be found guilty for a charge. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the process before we get there, allowing people these fundamental rights that they're already guaranteed by the Constitution to do. But we are, oftentimes people are just not, they're being deprived those in varying scales. And as always, what we see in our country, it's disproportionately affecting those who are poor, those who are people of color, indigenous peoples, as we've mentioned time and again, simply because that's who are most likely to be impacted by these policies that we've identified that need to be changed.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you both for sharing so much about your work, about the system, and I want to give you both a space, sort of as our last, my last question for both of you, is to just share anything else that you think folks need to know. Folks need to know about pretrial detention. Folks need to know about money bail, or folks need to know about the Mississippi Bail Fund Collective. Any parting words that y'all want to share? And I will start with Rukia.
Well, parting words is that the Mississippi Bail Fund Collective is active. We're open. We're here. We are here to support folks. You can find us by going to peoplesadvocacyinstitute.com or thebailproject.com. You can fill out a referral form online, or you can give us a call at 601-885-3240. That's it. Thanks. And we need you to be in this fight with us for bail reform.
I'll just add, I want to thank everybody who can hear our voices, everybody who would consider helping us in any way. That might be sowing your time, it might be sowing your resources towards these efforts. Everything is run. The People's Advocacy Institute is a nonprofit organization. The bail fund is operated off of charitable donations and just the giving of others. And so this work is only possible through people like yourselves who hear us, who see something in this work that it is necessary, and that again, you have to do something outside of yourself, which is what the People's Advocacy Institute and the Bail Fund Collective are all about. It's all about doing something for someone else, for someone who needs it in a time, most of the time, when these people are at their lowest, and we're able to come in and help them and literally change lives. I mean, we've seen situations turn around just in dramatic fashion that otherwise would not have happened without charitable donations and people like yourselves to help with this. And so we're just so grateful to any of you who feel moved by this in an effort to help us. Like I said, with your time, with your talents, with your with your resources or anything else. So just thank you so much.
Okay, well, I appreciate you both. It was wonderful to talk to both of you, to learn more about the system, to learn more about the great work that's being done. And I want to thank you all and wrap it up. Okay.